When I attended the first session of the three principles, one of my very first misunderstandings was that, oh, does Ian want us to suppress everything and just not think or feel anything is wrong and just live as if everything is just okay? And it really annoyed me thinking about that. And then after the second session, I realized that's the complete opposite.
Oh, it's good that you saw that. It's the fact that the feeling is coming from the thinking.
Okay.
It's actually independent of
the actual events.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're helping people to see, is that they're creating their feelings independently of circumstances, events, situations, or other people. Really what happens is what you thought was a problem, you see it's actually a thought problem. It's not a real problem. Most of our so-called problems are actually thought problems. We think them into existence. They wouldn't have any other independent existence were it not for our own thinking. Yeah. And when somebody sees that they've been doing that quite innocently, nobody would do that deliberately to themselves, but when anybody sees it, oh my God, I've been doing that to myself. As soon as we see it, we have a kind of built-in reflex that enables us to stop doing that, to just drop it. It just falls away. They don't need a technique to learn how to stop doing it. They just stop.
It's like they stop themselves in the act when they realize it.
Exactly.
If I ask about how people can start putting it to practice, that wouldn't really make sense because you don't really put it to practice.
You're right.
You find yourself.
This is a great question. It's a tricky question because the reality is everybody is putting it into practice every moment of their lives. So the three principles, it's not a technique for learning how to do a particular feeling state or how to feel a particular way. It's a description of how we create all of our experience. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So if someone is walking through life feeling very anxious, very stressed, very depressed, very upset, very frustrated, they're using the three principles beautifully to create that kind of an experience. They just don't know it.
Okay.
Right? So it's not a question of learning how to apply it. It's a question of seeing that you've been applying it all along, but you've been using it to create an experience that you don't want. And when you see that, you just reorient yourself. You say, well, okay, that's not very pleasant. Well, how would I rather experience life? And then you use the same principles to create a nicer experience for yourself. Some people just intuitively know. They know better than to stress themselves. Somehow they just know that. They know that that's not necessary. And these are often the people that others will look at and they say, that person's really lucky. Nothing seems to bother them. They just go through life, they seem to be in the flow of life, and they kind of wonder how they do that. But the person themselves doesn't really know how they do that. They just seem to have managed to stumble upon it themselves naturally. You've got to draw a distinction between different theories, because in the field of psychology, for example, there's a lot of different theories which clearly contradict each other. So depending on which school you've trained in, you're going to find, you look at you meet someone who trained in a different school, and some of what they've learned says the opposite to what you learned. So there's constant comparison and disagreement. The three principles is something that we say, and anybody who learns it will see for themselves, it's something that's true for everybody. And something that's true for everybody, you can't really argue with it. It's just a question of whether you see it for yourself or you don't. If you don't see it, then that's okay. We're not trying to convince anybody. It's not competing with any other theories. We're just saying, take a look at this, and if you're patient with people, and they take a look at it for long enough, pretty much everybody will start to see the truth of it for themselves. And that just resolves whatever contradictions or questions they had in their mind. They start answering themselves at a certain point. We saw that a lot in the workshop this last couple of days. People would start asking questions which seemed to challenge or contradict. Before they'd even finish the question, they go, oh no, I just answered it myself. This happened over and over.
Initially, I was introduced to the three principles through a friend, very, very briefly and very casually. The next thing I know is that Ian is in Egypt. I learned that he wants to offer a workshop in Guna. So I decided to host it at Insight. That was exactly a year ago.
Okay.
Next thing I know, I was on a plane to London attending the 1-year training. So I think back then I wasn't quite sure what this man was on about, but I was very curious as to how similar or different is it from what I've learned as being a psychotherapist. And it took me like a year to maybe get an idea or try to rationalize on some level what the 3 principles are about. And at first I was very, I want to say resistant, but maybe I was a bit resistant because technically it goes against everything I've learned. Like for the past 10 years, this man somehow took away everything I've learned and yet added to it at the same time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And how is it affecting your practice now, and when you see the clients, and how are you integrating it in your sessions?
I have been very, very slowly, and I think most clients are responding really well to it. Like they connect with it somehow. You know, they feel like there's something there, and it's familiar and it's simple. So yeah, it's easy for them to grasp on some level. So I'd say it's settling really well with most of them. Of course.
And have you consciously done that, or did you find yourself?
I haven't done anything consciously ever since I met this man. I haven't been doing anything on a conscious level, but I have been doing stuff. But yeah, not consciously.
Okay, that's interesting. So it just comes to you in the session. You find yourself.
No, seriously, I knew there was something there for me. You know, something.
Yeah.
I connected with what he was saying, and I knew there's something for me to explore.